operate things like farmers markets or farm-to-table food service or something like that, or bed and breakfast, or in this case, an event venue as well. So similar to like Net Farms, and I can't think of the winery down in Florence. It's a barn out in a rural area, but it's a big event facility, and it's very good. So that's another throughout the valley as well. So anyway, with council's direction, we went ahead and prepared and drafted an ordinance. Keep in mind, the city has low-density zoning districts. R143, I think, might be the lowest density district of the city. And unfortunately, there's no land zone in the city for R143. And then there's R19, which is residential, which is the R1 is a single family, and the 9 is 9,000 square foot lot minimums. So obviously, that's not a low density residential district by any means. However, that's the lowest density residential district in the city that's mapped in our zoning ordinance. So with council's direction, we did prepare this text amendment. Hopefully you all received a copy. It is based off other best practices that we could find in other communities and things that we're familiar with in Globe, and has been developed to allow Planning and Zoning Commission to make a recommendation to City Council whether or not they would like to adopt an ordinance like this or this ordinance and make it part of the zoning code. And how it's proposed, it would be an added use permit or use permitted through a conditional use permit process in the R19 zoning district with the criteria that you see listed there. So H, there's already up to G, allowed uses by approved use permit in the R19 district. This becomes H, item H, which is for an event venue facility subject to the following conditions. And you see hours of operation are being restricted. There's a minimum of 1.75 acres, so we want to really adhere to that character of large lot character. You see the operator must be on premises the whole time. We want to make sure if there's any problems with the property, should they get a use permit, that we know the operator is on site. And they could be contacted. Maximum number of guests up to 150. More could be approved with a specific, depending on the conditions of the property. Then obviously food consumption, hours of operation are restricted.
Here it is, one of the places.
Yes. Do you have a question? And we do have some people joining us from Zoom. I should probably be talking on the microphone.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
And to continue, minimum parking requirements and a parking plan would be required for somebody proposing such a use. Traffic plan, should it be such a use that necessitates a traffic plan or some sort of traffic control in city rights-of-way. There's a prescription for the number of required parking spaces, which is 2.25 parking spaces. I'm sorry, 1 parking space for every 2.25 guests would be allowed. So roughly 50 guests are coming. You need about 110. I'm sorry, you would need about 25, 23 parking spaces.
If Donald Trump had
Was that a question? No. And then parking lot setbacks are also provided. We want to maintain that residential character and rural character wherever it would occur. Screen all parking lot, parking areas from public view and other properties. And then there's a provision to restrict overnight accommodations.
I don't believe the meeting started yet. Either that or the audio's not coming through.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I meant meet them. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Hello? Are you attending the meeting by Zoom? All right, great. What we're doing right now is going through the neighborhood or the citizen review discussion for the proposed text amendment to allow event venues in the R19 zoning district. And I'm about halfway through. I think you've all received a copy of this via email, depending on who's here, but if it's Deanna, you have received that. If you would like to request a copy, please let Shelley Salazar know, our city clerk, and we'll make sure you get a copy after the meeting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if you've missed anything for this meeting. So I'm going to continue and explain the proposed text amendment, and then we'll open it up to questions. If temporary sanitary facilities such as porta potties are brought on site, they need to be located 50 feet away from any other residential structure or adjacent property. We do have specific noise levels that are required to ensure that rural character is preserved, and we don't have loud noises extending to other properties and becoming a nuisance. So we do have specific decibel levels, and that's above and beyond the existing city code, which is a little lighter in its prescription for noise nuisances. Also, we have a light or criteria to restrict the amount of light that's seen off property to ensure that there isn't any major parking lot lighting brought in that's going to disrupt the character of the neighborhood. And then also a provision to allow other incidental small group classes for a property if they're doing cooking classes or other agricultural type of petting zoo or something like that, or petting animal husbandry type of class or something like that. That would also could be a part of a use permit for this type of use. And then we always have any other conditions, given the unique scenarios that might present themselves in applications or unique properties. We have the ability to add additional criteria through the conditional use permit process. So with that, I would like to entertain any questions you might have on the proposed text amendment. And if you want to speak to the microphone, it'd be best for everybody to hear. So please let me know if anybody in the room has a question. Okay.
Looks good. Okay, I'm Travis Holder. My address is 1875 South Holder Drive. I guess my first question for you, Dana, as the city zoning planner, is why are you basically catering this CUP to this exact property when, if you look at the other, if you look at the zoning ordinance for the city of Globe, it says it must be 5 acres or more. This is 1.75 acres. Everything like that and everything else you basically changed to fit this exact property.
So the purpose of this is to allow, it was developed or directed by City Council to prepare an amendment. Like I started with, this is not an uncommon code or a use permit type of use that other communities allow in rural or low density areas.
But just for the record, I'd like everybody to understand it says in our zoning ordinance that it's 5 acres or more is how this would typically be. And I know there's a variation that you could do, but our zoning ordinance does say 5 acres. Am I correct?
So to clarify, you're speaking of a rezoning. So if somebody were to rezone their property?
No, to do a TR. In your TR, if you look at it, it basically says it has to be 5 acres or more.
Right, and that's for rezoning, is for PAD actually, what you're referencing.
Yes.
This is a text amendment.
The CUP to go R1-9.
Right.
Okay, so.
Well, yeah, correct.
Okay,
So they're two separate.
So this, I know it
issues.
gets kind of confusing because there's like several things going on here at once. So on this, the CUP, I guess my next question is, if you look at the city ordinance right now for the CUP, in R1-9, there is no ordinance that says anything about having this type of venues, events, anything like that in the current city ordinance.
Right, so I can
Is
read.
that correct?
I'll read the existing uses
I read it,
allowed.
but if everybody else
Right.
wants to hear it, that's great.
Yeah, let's do that. Let me get my computer.
Because, yeah, I've read it several times, and the closest thing I found to this is a home occupation, and it doesn't even allow for it in a home occupation either.
Okay, currently, the R19 zoning district allows, and give me one moment while I find the. All right, here we are. Here we are. Okay, currently in the R19 zoning district, you are allowed by right, so without a use permit,
Yes.
single-family home, home occupations, and other things that aren't really, that are swimming pools and accessory structures, stuff like that, that every district allows.
Right.
Then in the R19 zoning district, uses subject to conditional use permits allow churches and church facilities, but they have to be directly accessible from an arterial collector road, public buildings, cultural, recreational, educational, administrative, fire, and so forth, buildings with direct access to an arterial street. Elementary, secondary schools are allowed by use permit with access to a collector street or arterial. Recreational uses, provided the noise generated will be compatible with the neighborhood and abut arterial or collector street. Public utility buildings are allowed, obviously. They can go in most any district.
Is there more to that one about the neighborhood? I think it goes on as long as there's not noise, traffic, congestion, parking.
Right.
Could you read that, please?
I don't, which, is it a specific use
That was on
referencing?
the CUP.
for R19?
Yes.
It's a specific use in the R19?
Yeah. You started it, but I don't believe.
Public, and I'll quickly finish and I'll go back and I'll look to see if there's any additional,
Okay. and I got it on
detail.
Globe's website,
But
yeah.
cemetery, Travis, I'll quickly finish up so everybody hears it because it's a good question. Cemeteries are allowed by use permit in the R19 as well as bed and breakfasts, subject to parking, signage, and related restrictions to maintain the residential character of the property.
Right, so nowhere on there did you see events or venues?
No, correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I guess my next question is more of a statement. You know, it's, obviously we're opposed to this. Nothing against Darlene. I think she's a nice lady. I think she had good intentions. I mean, everybody needs to realize the city screwed up now. This is another workaround for the city to try. And honestly, it's not a bad idea for that type of thing in Globe. It's just in the wrong spot. You know, we have a private drive that's too narrow, that if you ever look at the highway there on the weekends, I can hardly pull out from there. On holidays, it's hard to get in and out of there. This summer, whenever they had the swimming lessons, which was a nice thing for her to donate that, at the same time, my daughter almost got hit head on. It's about safety, and it's not a good spot for this, and it's not, you know, if you had a home here and somebody were to try to do this to you and change the zoning or make a CUP and make it okay, you would probably not be real happy about it either. It sounds good and, you know, from the outside, but personally living there, there's a lot more issues than probably the public knows, but thank you for your time.
Dana, this is Paul Gilbert. I'd like to speak.
Please.
All right. I'm Paul Gilbert, and I represent Travis and Frank Holder. We question the very premise of this ordinance that provides for a conditional use permit. Let's talk about what's really happened here. Someone violated the zoning ordinance, and because she violated the zoning ordinance, she's asking for a zoning change. That isn't good planning. You plan for uses that make sense. This is default planning. So this is nothing more than an attempt to bail someone out of an illegal use that they started illegally, and it shouldn't be done. Furthermore, have you notified all the other R19 property owners in your city that this could be a use permit that would happen to them? So if this is citywide and you've got a lot of R19 property owners, I suspect that 99% of them don't know about this ordinance change, and they should be notified and have an opportunity to present their objections. You're proceeding with a text amendment. The process needs to be slowed down, and you need to get the most input possible. I've already mentioned there are a lot of R19 property owners that know nothing about this, and this will affect their property. There should be a much more extensive outreach to the community and other R19 property owners. By allowing a residential property to have a large public assembly use in an R19 zoning districts and abutting other residential homes will cause serious problems to property values and impact to people's property. There are serious unintended problems that have already arisen in connection with this use. This use could potentially put the city, I think, in a position of more lawsuits by owners claiming a diminution of value or other lack of public notice and input. Basically, you've got a lot of R19 property owners that don't know what's going on and don't know that if this ordinance passes, it could have a very deleterious effect on their property. I come back to the point that I started with. This is nothing more than an attempt to bail someone out of a illegal use. Nothing illustrates this more by the fact that your first requirement, H Roman numeral 1, says the minimum lot size shall be 1.75 acres. How fortuitous that the property that we're talking about is exactly 1.75 acres. There was no logic to picking the 1.75 acres. It was picked, obviously, to accommodate this use. This isn't good planning. It doesn't make sense. It's not right. And for the reasons stated, we will continue to vigorously oppose this ordinance amendment.
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else like to speak? It's citizen review. You can say whatever you'd like. Ideally, stick to the item that we're discussing.
My name is Daryl Gibson. I live at 1865 Holder Drive. I don't know how many people who are on Zoom or in here have seen the city council meetings that we've had before or listened to them. So that, not knowing that, I'm going to say a lot of things that I said before. But I think that Paul Gilbert definitely has a point. We've all been seeing it, that ever since you guys were brought to the knowledge that this place was not commercial and shouldn't be operating, you've been making every accommodation to allow it to continue. We've lived out here for 27 years. This way, we bought a piece of land from Kendrick Holder. We built a house on it. We raised our children there. We plan to retire there. Like I said in the last meeting, we always knew that there would be some sort of project on the lower field by our house. When we bought it, It was zoned commercial, so we figured we'd have a Walmart or something down there. Every single proposition or proposal of that land below us, since we've lived there, has always been some sort of residential. None of it's ever been commercial. Even the one that you guys were currently talking about, it's still going to be some sort of residential. So if you go ahead and make this some sort of a commercial property or a business, at some point, we're either going to have a business on the lower field and above us, we'll have it on 3 sides of us, or you're going to have this business operating within a place that has nothing but residential. In the notes that you sent us, you said there's a 50-foot portion that connects to a current commercial zoned area. The 50-foot that property joins is at least 20 foot down a hill or a cliff. It in no ways has access to this place on the hill. This house that we're talking about was built by Kendrick Holder, sold to Donnie DeVore. Peachy inherited it, and Miss Jonovich bought it from her. It's been residential the whole time. She knew it. When she bought it, it was residential. The whole plan was to turn this thing into a business. She already has a business. This is just one of them. And whether it was not knowing their job, incompetence, or just thinking that they could get it by, or not really even caring, the city gave them permits, some sort of commercial permits for fire or stove or whatever it is, and kept feeding into it. The city actually had a party up on their house there, still not caring or knowing that it's commercial. The only time, or that it's not commercial, the first time that the city acknowledged to us that they knew it was commercial is when we had a meeting in late March, and we told them it's not commercial, nor is the property around it commercial, and they were taken back by it, or so they said. So there's been nothing, everything that's happened has been the city trying to cater to the business on the hill and not really caring about the residents that are out there. There is not one residence out there that this thing is going to benefit. The city's not going to benefit by taxes. There's not going to be a lot out of it. If you look at the letters that were sent in by people who don't live in the area, they rave about the benefits of having a pool, a place to have a party. And you know what? The city should take note of that there is no place to swim or have lessons. But this is not the place. Like Travis said, this is not the place for it. What you got?
Daryl, and we have a public hearing on the rezoning item.
That's why I was asking
This is
if
much more specific to, this item is strictly the neighborhood meeting for the text amendment. I think you reiterate your concern.
Opposed to all.
Zoning. Thank you.
That's why I asked before I came up if I was, all right. I'll tell the story again later.
Pick up where you left off there. Does anybody else have any comment on the proposed text amendment? Zoom have a further comment on the proposed text amendment? Very good. Well, thank you all for attending. Hopefully everybody signed in, so we have record of who attended this citizen review meeting. That's ending at 6 o'clock, and then we're going to go ahead and begin the meeting tonight. So please, if you didn't sign in on your way out. And if you need additional information, there are some handouts up there, and you can, with my information on it, and you can contact me to add any further info. Just to give you a heads up, Planning and Zoning Commission is currently advertised to hold a public hearing on the text amendment that we discussed before most of the crowd walked in on November 18th at 6 p.m. So thank you very much. All right. And with that, we're just going to take a quick break and then get ready for Planning and Zoning Commission, have our commissioners take their seats at the dais, and keep going. Thank you.
Here.
Commissioner John Shumway,
Here.
Commissioner Ian Dernan,
Here.
Commissioner Carl Williams,
Here.
and Commissioner Bodie.
Curvin.
Yes. We have a quorum. We have a quorum. Thank you, Bodie.
Excellent. So moving on to first item, business, consideration of to approve the September 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes. Hopefully you've had time. I think there's 2 of you in the room right now that was available at that meeting. Is there a motion to approve or any comments or changes to the minutes?
Make a motion to approve.
I second it.
Motion passed. Call the question of a vote. We have a motion on the floor with a second. Any further discussion? No further discussion, and we need to call the vote. And go ahead.
Aye.
What are we voting for?
Meeting minutes, approval of the meeting minutes
Aye.
from last meeting.
Yes.
Aye.
Excellent. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to business, item 1B. So this is a public hearing and consideration of rezoning case number Z-20-01, a request to rezone the property located at 1855 South Holder Drive from R19 zoning district, single-family residential zoning district, to the transitional TR zoning district with a planned area development overlay.
I need to, at this time, recuse myself for this due to a conflict of interest.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And would you mind starting the presentation, Danny?
Bodie, would you like to?
So quickly, commissioners, what I'm going to do is just take you through a presentation. And then after I give you the staff report and the information, which you all received the staff report previously, hope you've had a moment to review. You're welcome to interrupt me at any point if you have specific questions on what we're talking about or what I'm presenting at the time. After I'm done, we'll open it up for commission discussion. Then you can close and open up to public hearing. Prior to doing that, you may also ask the applicant if they'd like to speak and answer and do a Q&A with the applicant, and then we'd open up the public hearing, and I'll walk you through that. So that's basically the process. But throughout, I encourage you, if you have any questions at any time, please stop me. Feel free. Thank you very much. Danny, do I have the remote? No, I don't. Quickly, the rezone process, just to quickly orient you, requires obviously an application from the somebody that wants to rezone their property, which we have here. Then there's a notice issued for a neighborhood meeting, and we hold a neighborhood meeting, and all the property owners surrounding the property are notified. Then we advertise a public hearing and hold our discussion on that here at Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, where they also will hold a public hearing again. So that's, we are now at the Planning and Zoning Commission, obviously, a public hearing item. So specific rezoning PAD requirements, and what a PAD is basically an overlay over the underlying district, which is being proposed for TR. Sorry. And TR is the Transitional Residential Zoning District. It's basically intended to be a transition from a commercial use to a strictly residential use. It allows office buildings and office type uses and other types of uses that would provide a good buffer in between commercial and residential. In this situation, the PAD further tailors that allowed use and the development standards to be very specific, to have very strict limits on not allowing any office uses and things like that. So just giving you a heads up, that's what the PAD, Planned Area Development Overlay, is intended to do. is designed to do in this situation. So that said, I'll orient you to the existing site. Let me see if oh, and it doesn't work on the TVs. So if you all see in the middle of the image there, you see DJ's Casa. And the darker lines under, transparent lines underneath are the parcel boundaries. So you can see we went through and identified the last name of, or the name on the tax record for all the property owners surrounding this property. You see Holder Drive is a narrow driveway or roadway. They're located on the east side of the Hollis Mixed Use PAD and DJ's Casa. Quickly, also the zoning is shown on here. All the yellow area is zoned R19 currently. All the red area is zoned C2, with exception to some nuances that the Hollis Mixed Use PAD is basically a C2 property, but it has a PAD. It has an overlay that with very specific criteria that's intended for the development to occur on that property. And at the end of the very end of the presentation, I'll show you an image of what that is. DJ's Casa is flanked by two properties you see there. The Domelins on the south, and north is to the top of the screen. And then the Gibsons on the west side. And then other lots we have, Travis and Diane Holder are down the street from the Gibsons there. They're probably 500 feet away from DJ Casa. The Bakers are their neighbor. And then the Holders actually own the other two, the Salome properties located in Patty Holder lives in one of those two homes. And then you see the two other homes that are in this area. All of these homes, there's 9 total that use Holder Drive as their driveway or their access to their property. And I'll get into those details of Holder Drive coming up. JT Morning Glory is the largest parcel, and it's 103 acres, and it wraps all of these parcels for the most part. And that property was purchased from the Holders some time ago. Just to explain also, the green area are zoned for open space, and like I said, red's commercial. So, and then you have the Vuksanovich family on the east side there also. And then across the street, it's all commercial, and there's an industrial building and some uses on the south side of US 60. Okay. There's a close-up of the existing site. You see DJ's Casa in the middle there, the large home with the pool. It sits perched up on top of a hillside that's been graded or filled, and overlooks the Gibson's property on the left and the Domlins on the right. The Domlins probably has the white walls that are notable. And here's a perspective, actually from the Dream Manor. It was taken some time ago, but up on top, but right in the middle of the screen would be that DJ's Casa property. Domlins again with the white walls, and then the Gibsons to the left of them. And then further to the left, you see those two homes, newer constructed homes, which is Travis Holder and Ray Baker's home. All right, and again, they all access, there's Holder Drive right there, providing access to all those lots. So the existing zoning is R19. Permitted uses in the R19 are basically single-family dwellings or home occupations in your single-family dwelling. Uses allowed by conditional use permit in the R19 currently are churches, public schools, public buildings, schools, recreational uses, cemeteries, bed and breakfasts. And aside from bed and breakfasts, all those uses are very specific to be located off of a collector road or an arterial road, as we want to make sure people interior or lots interior to a subdivision on a local road, it doesn't all of a sudden have one of these types of uses that is going to create traffic issues in the neighborhood. And then bed and breakfasts can go anywhere, but it has a provision to require that they maintain the residential character because it's in a residential neighborhood, and we want to preserve that character. This proposed transitional PAD zone has the same, the text in black is the R19 standards. The text in red are the overlay or the added standards or uses being requested. So daycare of 5 or fewer children is a permitted use, and that's largely allowed in many residential districts as it is. Private event venue, subject to conditions, and then some incidental small group classes at that venue could operate during date hours or early hours and, as an alternative use for that type of property. And then the one item we added by condition or being proposed by uses by conditional use permit is for a child care center of more than five children. And then also there are very specific development standards that the applicant has included, including how parking is addressed, setbacks, minimum lot size, so if they're ever to subdivide the property, there's a minimum lot size, and so forth. For the most part, they're all more restrictive overlay standards than the underlying TR district development standards. So, through staff's review, we identified issues as well as in meeting with the neighborhood and community and having conversations. And one of those issues is the disposition of Holder Drive. Basically, when this area was parceled to allow these other 8 homes to build and operate on this property, it wasn't subdivided. It didn't go through a subdivision process, which we would typically require today, which would include backbone roadway system, loop water system, sewer, things of that nature. Unless it's a very low density development, then you can subdivide, you can parcel, 5-acre parcels and things like that, but they don't require this level of infrastructure that a 9,000 square foot lot subdivision would require. So we have this roadway. It sits on the JT Morning Glory property. It is 18 feet wide, probably at the widest that I could see. It tapered down to 15 in situations. Basically, the original owners, Mr. Holder, put in that roadway, Holder Drive, obviously, and then granted easements to these 9 other houses to take access, or 8 other houses to take access. And that's why the roadway system is just very organic, I guess. So that's the situation. You see the detail here of what the city engineer would require for a commercial operation on this roadway would be a minimum of 24 feet wide of pavement and then some shoulders. And why that's required, it's for safe traffic movement, emergency vehicle access, so two-way traffic, and that's basically the minimum standard for two-way traffic. You'll see in your staff reports and some discussion on should the commission wish to recommend approval of this request. We have conditions related to requiring the improvement of Holder roadway and limitations on the total occupancy of an event at the property until those improvements occur. And then here, other issues were meeting the minimum parking requirements. Again, it was a single-family home, or is a single-family home, and if it were to change to an event venue, it would require on-site parking. As any change in use that occurs, if the new proposed use for a property is increasing or has a higher parking demand, then that applicant would be required to make the improvements to accommodate those additional impacts, be it traffic or parking or what have you. So in this situation, there was a quick exercise just to see how many parking spaces are available on top of the hill, and then down below also there was a graded area, and we calculated about 43 parking spaces could be accommodated. We know that these types of events would typically have about 2.25 people per car, or in between 2 and 3 people per car, as a method of calculating required on-site parking. So with just that parking alone, let's say 43 spaces, and that's how it's kind of reviewed and evaluated in your staff report, the property would be allowed about 100 people to attend at one event because we think that would be parked on the site. There are also in the conditions, should the applicant request, or the applicant has requested up to the occupancy allowed at this property by the fire marshal, which is about 223 people, or is 223 people, plus or minus additional people in the swimming pool, actually. But anyway, so should an event of that level ever be requested, off-site parking is required. And again, in the conditions, we do outline standard or a criteria that gives staff and the city comfort in knowing that we can make sure that this will be parked in a manner that won't impact or will impact any neighbors in the least. But by no means can any cars be located off the property without permission from an adjacent property owner. And they have had conversations with the Hollis property to the south to give them overflow parking if it ever would be needed. Finally, the other issue, a lot of concerns from neighbors of sound. They have been having events and parties up there, or events up there, and other activities where that sound carries. You have to understand this area is probably one of the more rural neighborhoods in the city. Though it's zoned R19 for 9,000 square foot lots, it's developed in a way that is very rural in character. It definitely has that character when you're out there. So obviously a tremendous concern of the neighbors are, we don't want to hear sound echoing. It's kind of in a valley, the 60 valley there. There's a hillside across on the south side as well, and they back up to a peak or a mountain. Obviously to date, there's probably the only noise is probably highway traffic. So any additional noise obviously could be audible. So again, we have outlined criteria in your staff report for conditions to address that. And this map shows an 8-foot wall along the east side to provide some sort of sound barrier from the property to the properties to the east and the Gibson's property, as well as a area for a tree canopy to help absorb some of that sound and light and other activity. And those are also, again, this exhibit actually is included as in your criteria for the staff report. So as I mentioned, there is a development. The property, DJ's Casa, is currently located up by the top right corner of your screen, and all of those lots, the 3 lots plus the Holders and Baker's lots you see there surrounded. This property was rezoned for this mixed-use development back in 2015, and we understand it's still in process and still viable development. Then there's a close-up just to understand. I think at the time the developer was interested to provide single-family or a residential buffer to these properties, though the PAD doesn't necessarily specify that would be a required scenario, but it is obviously a part of the plan. So we've had considerable citizen input since this rezoning application has been filed, and even prior to, knowing it's an existing zoning violation. There's some unique circumstances that surround this, and I think your report explains that to some extent. But we have so far to date received 7 letters of opposition from the surrounding property owners. And like I said, there's 8 other single-family homes in this area. So for the most part, I think the majority of the neighborhood property owners object and oppose, and you have their letters. as well as their statements this evening at public hearing, and also a part of prior council meetings. Just today, we received a letter from Vuksanovich family that hopefully was forwarded to you, and if not, I'll make sure that's available to you. I think, I'm sorry, we have them printed out for you. So you see that Vuksanovich, and as well, JT Morning Glory Enterprises also submitted a letter yesterday or the day before opposing this rezoning. Keep in mind, they also own the property that Holder Drive sits on, and they, in their letter to you, they oppose dedicating any future roadway or any expansion of the roadway, and they oppose this rezoning request as well. So obviously that certainly complicates the roadway widening. It would not fit within the 30-foot easement that exists there, so additional work needs to be done on the applicant's behalf here, or the applicant needs to continue to work through that. But as of now, I'll wrap up here and then get to the recommendation. We have several letters of support provided by the applicant. I think there's one neighbor, the Domlins, who haven't objected to this use and have expressed limited, if any, really haven't expressed any opposition at all. They actually support it. So, and then finally this evening we're going to hold a public hearing after we finish our discussion, and then you'll be able to receive additional comment from the public, and then close that public hearing, and then have a wrap-up discussion and possibly take action. So in the staff report, you see staff did not take a position. We just advise you that you are allowed to recommend the city council approve, deny, or approve this with conditions. And staff noted, if you wish to approve this with conditions, we have a list of 13 conditions, I believe, in your staff report. I will add, I would also add, if you do wish to make a recommendation to approve, we also add that red bullet, that incidental small group classes such as sewing, fitness, swimming, etc., be included in that in those conditions and the recommendation. All right. So with that, that's all I have for a presentation, and I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have.
Is this when we open it up to the public, or is this just for us to ask questions?
If you'd like to just ask questions, if you have something on your mind right now of me, it would probably be the good time to ask that for clarity.
Okay.
And then once you get that off, out of the way, then maybe open up for the public.
Okay, well, do you have any questions to ask direct?
Yeah, I just have a question in general. I'm really interested in knowing what impact this has across the city in terms of other R19 owners. I'm really kind of concerned in terms of, what does this do to, what can this do to property values, and honestly, how many R19 owners are impacted, I guess is another question I have.
Got it. Chairwoman, Councilman, or Vice Chair, Commissioner. So I think you're referencing the text amendment that we held our neighborhood meeting on, or citizen review meeting earlier. This rezoning request is specific to that property and doesn't affect any other R19 district in the area. It only affects their adjacent neighbors. So it's strictly for that property in the middle of those three with the red roof. So this is a rezone request just for that property, and it's somewhat similar to the language that you had heard earlier, but this doesn't affect any other R19 property owners aside from the neighborhood, because obviously having this use might impact, have negative impacts on their property, which they've expressed.
Another question I have, if I may.
Yes.
So the folks that own the 103 acres, what plans do they have for that in the long haul?
No plans that they expressed to me. They were very difficult to get a hold of. They were very limited in their conversation with me. It is for sale. If anybody's interested, that's the best that they could offer. But they, right now they have no intention to market it or do anything with it.
So they don't have representation by any type of like real estate agent or?
They do. They have a property management company that oversees this and provided the letter that you have in your packet where they oppose the request.
I guess, yeah, one question I have is, in terms of, how are they marketing the property? Are they marketing it as a residential, or are they marketing it as a, commercial kind of property? That's kind of one of my questions are, I don't know who represents, the JT Morning Glory Enterprises, but I guess that's another concern I have.
So right now it's zoned residential. So ideally they'd market it as what it's zoned. But like I said, I received no sense of urgency on their behalf to do anything. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it's high on their radar for disposition. But yeah, they just did mention, eventually they'll sell it. So.
Thank you. Councilman, do you have any questions?
I had one question.
All right.
I'll turn this on. Does it work? Yeah, I had one question, sir. I guess it's a requirement the city engineer has stated for widening the road. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's out to from Holder Drive to US 60. And who has the burden of? Is that the entrepreneur that'll pay for that road, or who has the burden of? Because I know that's pretty expensive.
Right. And traditionally, the developer, the person that needs that road widened, would be the party to widen it.
Would take on that expense.
Right. Thank you. Do you have any more questions for him?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. I do have a question. Just something that was brought up in the meeting before that I thought was an interesting concern is the residents made a statement that the property was rezoned exactly the exact amount of acreage as the location is for rezoning it to we're going to change it from R19 to R143, is that correct?
Yes, but I should probably give you some clarification on that.
Okay.
I think there was some confusion in that item.
There was.
So again, that was the text amendment. And the language for the text amendment that you heard previously,
Yes.
that you'll hear in the same format that we're discussing this rezoning, you'll hear that on November 18th. And yes, you see the language. It is, I think the minimum area is 1.75 acres. And that is, the purpose of that is almost 2 acres, right? Or it's a large lot.
Correct.
And like I mentioned, this type of use in the research that we found, now we're getting off subject, but I think
No.
it's relevant.
Yes.
The uses or the other communities that we researched and looked at, it's a large lot rural kind of mentality. So it's on a, acre plus for sure. We know that from research. You got to have at least an acre to have something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we're not talking right now. We're not talking about this request.
No.
And we'll get back to it, but I just want to provide that clarification.
Oh, good, 'cause
It's
that was
the idea is a rural
confusing.
character.
Mhm.
Yes, and this property in this area, as I mentioned, does have a rural character to it. So coincidentally.
Okay, just a couple more questions. Earlier in the presentation, you said currently you want to have it for 150 people, considering there's 2.5 guests per car, and then something about 43 parking spots. Is that correct?
So what's being requested is to be allowed to have their maximum occupancy, which is 223.
223, but they don't
Correct.
currently have parking spots for 223.
Not on site. However, adjacent property has offered, the commercial property down the hill has offered, allowed them to use that for overflow parking should they have an event to that scale.
I actually have that paper here, and it clearly says that we're going to allow it so long as we don't do something different with it. So if we don't sell it, you can use it.
Right.
If we sell it, then no, you can't use it anymore, which is, I get it.
Yeah.
And then they need to reapprove it every year if they're going to use it again. So every year it needs to go up for reapproval. And it could be canceled at any time on the sole discretion of Hollis Investment Properties. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's what the paper says?
And then correct, however, that came in 2 days ago. The staff report was already written, and we already, I'll direct you to the language that addresses that specific item. And we crafted it in a way that allows it on a case-by-case basis. Either way, city is the approving authority.
Okay.
So that.
I just want to make sure I understood that one.
Yes, good eye. That's a confusing one. So if you look at, let me read really quick. Right, item number 4 in your recommended motion. If you wish to recommend council approve this, we would suggest you have this criteria 4B, all this criteria, but this, your specific question is item 4B.
Correct.
The number of available on-site parking spaces multiplied by a factor of 2.5 people is what is allowed on the property. For example, if 43 spaces are provided on site, a maximum occupancy with 93 people, including service personnel, an off-site parking agreement, and this is the key phrase, or portion of this criteria. An off-site parking agreement with another property owner may be considered on a case-by-case basis to allow an increase in occupancy for a single event, only after the above item A is met, which is expanding the right-of-way, obviously. So what that does is gives the city the authority to make sure we know where you're parking and it's not gonna, it's in an approved location.
Okay. So 43 times 2.5 is 107, is that correct? This,
2.25?
yeah, 2.25 times 43,
Let me see.
197? Okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure I understood that, and that was clear. And then, okay, well, I guess we're ready to,
Ian may have had a question.
Yeah, I had another question here, two questions. Has anyone considered the potential impact to the property values in that area for the residential? So if this were to be rezoned to TR and it becomes, full-fledged business, they expand that road and there's a lot more traffic, I didn't know if anyone asked local realtors or anyone to kind of assess kind of what happens in those circumstances, or if you know as well, Dana, from your experience.
We tend to stay focused as a planner, focused on the land use aspects and these impacts and how does it fit in with this fabric? Is it compatible or not? And not necessarily get in. Obviously we can't predict how that would impact, but I'm sure the property owners adjacent will respond to that. I do know, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Is it okay if I do ask any of the residents of the area?
so we're going to get to that in just a minute when we open up the floor.
And I have another question as well.
So all of these questions are directed to him.
Yeah, these ones are, yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, this one, I don't know if it was previously mentioned, it might need to be asked of Ms. Darlene Jonovich, if she was willing to pay for that road. I didn't know if anything was, I don't recall reading anything on that, but I don't know if she had maybe mentioned that in the past.
Okay, great point. And Vice Chair, Commissioners, if you'd like to go ahead and open it up for a presentation or a response from the applicant.
Okay, great. Is Ms. Jonovich here?
Or a representative
Or a representative?
online. If Deanne or Deanna or. I think Deanna or her,
Yes, I believe so. Deanna, can you hear us?
Yeah, this is Deanna. I believe Larry is on, Larry Schubart, and I believe he would respond to the road situation. He is on mute right now, however.
If I may speak to that issue, if it is a condition for permitting the use, then it would be incumbent upon the applicant to resolve that condition in order to have the use for the property. So I think that answers the question that if it had to be done, then as a condition of allowing or approving the rezoning, then it would be incumbent upon the applicant.
Did that answer your
Yeah, that
question?
answered my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry.
All right.
So is there any more questions directed directly to Dana? Otherwise, we can open it to the floor. Okay.
I'd like to ask one more question. When you were talking, you mentioned there's several stipulations where if until you do this, you have to do this, as far as number of people and so forth. And, I mean, just looking at this overall, not just this particular case, how could that be followed to make sure it's being adhered to or not being exceeded, or like number of people or anything like that? Is there a mechanism in place for that?
The cities, obviously just watching it, we can add any specific conditions to the business license, but it's definitely, that is a tough one. How do you know how many people are inside that home or what's
whatever the
happening?
stipulation
Usually when
is.
you have or whatever the stipulation, the easiest is we can go through the individual noise complaints, obviously.
Or neighbors.
We'll send out the code enforcement or PD. Just our many administrative mechanisms we have to enforce all of these. And we certainly wouldn't present those if we didn't think we could enforce them.
Thank you.
I guess we'll now open it to the audience. If you would.
Yeah, would you like to, okay, so Larry or Deanna, would you guys like to address Planning and Zoning Commission on behalf of the applicant? Hearing no one, I would say if you'd like to go ahead and
Hold on a
open up the public hearing at this time.
Let's see. All right. Larry, would you like to address the council at this time, or?
I think I'd make any comments in reply.
Okay.
Sure, I think the application speaks for itself.
Okay, what about Deanna? Would she like to address or just comment throughout as well?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
So I know Darlene is there in the audience, so as I talked earlier today, really quickly, just again to the commissioners on behalf of Darlene, just to provide a little bit of background information. So, several years ago, she wanted to develop the property as an event center, and she was told that the property was zoned commercial. She's worked over the previous 2 years with the building codes department, the health department, and made substantial modifications to the property to upgrade the existing improvements to bring it to commercial standard. She's spent substantial dollars rebuilding the facility to meet ADA standards. She had to also convert the kitchen to a commercial kitchen, comply with all of the ADA handicap accessible bathrooms and standards. She also had to go through a process to convert the swimming pool to meet commercial standards. And so, as we've said, at the conclusion of all of that, she was issued a business license and operated the business for more than 5 months before any issue arose. There has been multiple functions up there. There was a city function up there last year. Never brought to her attention there was any issues with the property or the zoning. We do know that, the neighbors do have objections. We are hoping through the rezoning process we can address some of those issues. And so we're really here today to hear what some of those objections are.
Okay, thank you very much. We will
Open the public hearing.
open the public hearing.
Anybody that wishes to speak, please step up to the podium, state your name, address, and speak. And we'd like to, if it's something similar that somebody else says, if you can just acknowledge that, and we'll try and keep the times to 3 to 5 minutes. Thanks.
Okay. My name is Darrell Gibson. I live in 1865 Holder Drive, just below the property in question. It's hard to summarize your life's work and home in 3 to 5 minutes, but a couple of things. When when Darlene closed on the house, it closed as residential. When she pays her taxes, it's residential. There had to be paperwork signed when this house closed. It closed as residential, regardless of what anybody says. She knew it was residential. She bought the home with intentions of starting a business. She bought a residential home to start a business. She just so happened to get the commercial permits from the city of Globe. So far, out of all the homeowners out there, there is one who is not opposing it. That's the Domlins. Other than the property in question, which they're the newest homeowners out there, this commercial property, or when they want to be a commercial property, this business, they're the newest homeowners out there. They've lived there the least of anybody. The second is the Domlins. Nice people, have no problem with them at all, but they're not going to be there long. They have property next to one of their relatives. They're going to sell. They're going to build another house. They do not have to live with the results of your actions on the rezoning. So, out of everybody who owns property around there, there's only one that is not opposing it. Morning Glory will not let you adjust their road at all. It is not a city road. It's a private road. Private water, no city sewer, nothing, no sidewalks. The road has always been maintained by the current homeowners. Each of us has an easement, I think, except for the Domlins. They use it, but they don't have an easement on the road. So the fact that all of them but the Domlins oppose this, no one's going to let you work on the road. It is of no benefit to anybody in the area but the Jonoviches. So you're going to hear people say that, oh my gosh, they let us use the pool. We've had a great party up there, all this other stuff. And that, it's fine. It shows you how many violations there's been to the zoning, but it goes to show you that the city needs to come up with something also. Listen to what they're saying they did up there, and they need places like that. But this is not it. It's in the middle of a residential area. He showed you an overlay of the proposed housing on the field below us. If you look it up again, look at all the yellow. Let's say you were to give her the commercial or the zoning that they're asking for. If that gets approved, it will be an island of a commercial or a business. Nothing around it will be that. And another thing is there's discrepancies on what you want to call spot zoning. This zoning is specifically for this house. He already told you it's not for any other R1s in the city. It is crafted just for this place, my opinion, because the city's in a little bit of a bind. I'm not saying that Dana is defending it or anything like that. But it's all to kind of ease the situation for everybody but us. So everyone's opposed to it. You're not going to get much taxes out of it. And another thing, it was showing that when it comes to the amount of people that could be on that property, I want you to picture where you live. Picture over 100 vehicles around there. 40 to start, okay? 40 to start, but picture 223 people at the house next door to you. It's just, I don't know where most of you live, but just picture it. That's what could happen out there. But I think the fact that everybody's against it but one, no benefit to the city. I think that you guys should reject it, leave it as a residential, and we would be more than happy to accept a residence, someone living up there. I think that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have?
Good time. This is Paul Gilbert.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Paul Gilbert. I represent Frank and Travis Holder. We are adamantly opposed to this case. I'd like to make two general observations right at the outset. One, this isn't zoning and planning. This is bailout. Planning and zoning should be planned, integrated, and a planning process followed. That isn't what's being accomplished here. What's being accomplished is someone took a home and turned it into a commercial operation and then is trying to bootstrap that to get zoning. So this is zoning by bailout, not zoning by planning. Secondly, this case isn't even in the posture where it can be considered by the Planning Commission. All the requirements that the applicant has to comply with to process this TR and then overlay PAD have not been complied with. They don't have a site plan. They don't show the setbacks. They don't show all the requirements that are a precondition to having this case heard. So it isn't technically in the posture when you can approve. The proposed stipulations, for example, by the staff talk about that they will check and enforce and that they will make them comply by the site plan. There's no site plan. It doesn't exist. And there's no dimensions on the submittal. So this is not even in the posture, I submit, where you could approve it. I'd like to point out a couple of highlights from the staff report. I'm keenly aware the staff didn't make a recommendation, but I submit they have by some of the comments they've made here. First of all, they point out that the Northeast Area Plan, which governs this property, is rural residential. It is not TR, so it doesn't comply with the area plan. How can you approve something that doesn't comply with the area plan? Furthermore, the staff also makes an excellent point by pointing out that the area is rural in character, and not only rural, but unique. It's in a zoning district that allows 9,000 square foot minimum lot size, and then goes on to point out that these home sites have the appearance and character not only of a rural neighborhood, but a large rural neighborhood. This project, if approved with TR zoning, is not only a spot zone, it sticks out like a sore thumb. And then I like this comment in your staff report. There are no properties in Globe zoned as R143. Then it says the Holder Drive area is one of the lowest density neighborhoods in Globe at this time. So you're taking a commercial use and putting it in the middle of the lowest density neighborhood in Globe. That's not good planning. That is nothing more than a spot zone. Let's talk about traffic. First of all, Holder Drive is a private road. I'm going to talk about in a moment, one of the requirements of TR zoning is you have to have access on a public road. You don't even have the jurisdiction to approve this because they don't front on a public road. Furthermore, they talk about widening. Well, they may be willing to pay for it, but they also have to have permission. And a private road means they've got to get permission from the other neighbors, and the other neighbors are opposed. So they can't comply with that requirement that the road be widened, leaving them with an 18-foot road to provide access for 250 people. I also like the staff comment that there is a great potential for noise trespass. That's a big concern that you've already heard from the neighbors on. Now, let me go through and talk about a few technical things. When I say this project isn't even in the posture where it can be approved, the Transitional Residential Zone District, the TR District, it doesn't allow the use proposed. It's not an allowed use in this district. I looked through the TR ordinance and there's nothing that says you can have an event center. So even if you zone this for TR Transitional, an event center wouldn't be allowed. Now they're putting a PAD overlay on it, but the PAD just gives you the development standards. It doesn't modify the uses, and it's the underlying zoning, the TR, that deals with the uses, and this use, event center, is not allowed in the TR. Furthermore, the planned area overlay, if you're going to use it, requires a minimum acreage of 5 acres. Has been made very evident. They only have 1.75 acres. So they don't even qualify for a PAD. So a couple of other things. Let's look at the requirements for a PAD. You have to have substantial open space. Not here. Another requirement. You have to preserve the natural character of the land. I don't see any effort to do that here. Then the other requirement is there has to be a building design, site design, and amenities that create a unique alternative to conventional development, conspicuously absent here. Then there are some supplementary provisions too. It says every structure has to have access to a public street. We've already established, the applicant has admitted, Folger is a private street. So again, it doesn't even meet the technical requirements of required by the PAD. And then I think one of my biggest objections to this is that the development site plan is missing or woefully incomplete. Although the building is existent, they need to provide a development plan or site plan showing the existing conditions. They don't have any measurements on the building footprint. They don't have any way of checking to see if we can meet the parking that is required. And then they have not provided an engineering drawing or scale dimension, which is required because there are serious problems such as health and safety issues, particularly for such a large public assembly use, and you have no site plan to measure that by. So in closing, this isn't planning, this is a bailout. And it's too bad, but if this case is approved, then anybody in Globe that owns a residential home can come in and start putting in commercial improvements and then come in after the fact and say, hey, I put these commercial improvements in and you got to bail me out. The neighbors don't like it. All of the neighbors but one are in adamant opposition. So this isn't a good case. It's a spot zone and it doesn't meet the qualifications. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Anyone else have comments?
Hey, this is Travis Holder, 1875 South Holder Drive. I think Paul said it a lot. One thing I'd just like the council to know is, you know, you guys are just hearing bits and pieces. This has been going on for a while. We know how this started. You know, basically the property owner got permits through the city, shouldn't have got those permits. You know, there's a bunch of mistakes made by the city, everybody knows that. But the due diligence wasn't done, or it was done to start a business in a residential neighborhood. However it happened, it doesn't matter at this point. What really matters is, this is a spot zone if you were to approve this. I mean, I've been in zoning for quite a few years now myself, and there's very few parts of this that doesn't show a spot zone. Like Dana was saying, or he said earlier, the 1.75 acres, that's exactly what theirs is. If you look at city code, it's 5 acres. If you look at other places, there may be something different, but if you look at this property, it's about over a mile as the bird flies the closest TR. There's no TR anywhere around there. And we keep talking about this abutting property. That abutting property, they say 50-something feet before it was 20-something feet. Whatever that little slice is that's up on top that connects to the Hollis's property, that's at a different level. That's on vacant land. And what it abuts to is C2, and it does have a PAD around it. But if you look, there's nothing else connected to the city zoning map. It says C2 with a PAD. This isn't going to C2, this is going to TR. So TR is a transitional residential. That's supposed to be for a buffer between commercial and residential. It's not supposed to be the commercial in a residential. This, as Paul said, this is an exact spot zone. The city's trying to cover their tracks, they're trying to make things right, and at this point, honestly, the only thing to do is to vote this down and to move forward with basically, if this property needs to be sold and she needs to find a place that's commercial to do this, I think there's a need for this. I truly do. Obviously, we got all these letters of people that swam there that, you know, we had swimming lessons. That's awesome. Globe needs that. Unfortunately, it's a residential neighborhood. It's always been a residential neighborhood. I can assure you, if this were passed and it changed to this, everybody else is going to say, hey, I want, you know, my property might go down because this, you know, would you want this in your small neighborhood? I mean, at the end of the day, the right thing to do is to vote this down. And it's unfortunate because it is a beautiful property. We went to the meeting. You know, my grandfather built this house with his own 2 hands. It's a beautiful home, but when I was there last, they had shag carpet. Now it's got beautiful wood floors, a commercial kitchen. It's a beautiful home, undoubtedly. We would have welcomed another neighbor there. Unfortunately, the only thing the city allows that's even close to this would be a home occupation. She doesn't want to live there. So that's another predicament. It's our neighborhood. We would welcome somebody that wants to live there, but the fact that it's just there to make money, and even if it doesn't make a lot of money, this is not the place for this type of property. It's just, it is a private drive. And we keep saying, oh, it's 18 feet. I measured it. There's one place that's 14 feet wide. One place is 15. And the other thing to think about is if you were to try to do it with all these stipulations, the Hollis property has already told you, oh, guess what? We're thinking about selling. So if we sell, you can't use this. Or we could say, you know what? This maybe we didn't realize people might be drinking. Oh, but we're going to just pull this. So that's one stipulation you cannot count on. The other stipulation is the width of the road, because JT Morning Glory would have to grant the right to do anything with that road bigger than what it is, and guess what? They're opposed to it. So I mean, there's nothing that fits except this is a spot zone by the city, and it totally fits that, and it's like the city's trying to cover up for their mistakes, and unfortunately, Darlene's going to pay for it somewhat, but let's be honest, she could sell that house in a heartbeat. Right now, Globe is booming. My wife's a realtor. She cannot get listings fast enough right now. I promise she could sell it very fast. That's what she chose to do. If she wants to move in it, we'll welcome her as a neighbor. But this is not the place for a commercial. I could go on about the zoning not being a good fit, about it being a spot zone, about it being TR, about it not matching, on and on. But at the end of the day, it's not a good fit. It's a huge liability. And one thing that nobody's talked about tonight is the highway. Yeah, we have a narrow road, and maybe you make it wider, maybe it's better. But that highway, on the weekends, during the summer, now it's overflowing later in the spring, any holidays, you can't get on that, often on that highway. Late last year, early this year, one of our neighbors got rear-ended trying to turn in there and totaled their vehicle. And so that's the same thing. There is a passing lane right in front of the drive-in theater. I don't know, it's not a lane, but it's a dotted line, so people can pass there. So whenever you go to turn left, you got to be careful because somebody might try to pass you and run into you. You turn into them. It's dangerous. It's a huge liability on the city. It's absolutely a spot zone, and I would appreciate if you guys would vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holder. Would anyone else like to make a comment? Oh, I'm sorry. You next, I'm sorry.
My name is Rose Domlin. I reside at 1839 South Holder Drive. We're not exactly the newest people out there, but we're close to it. We are a very close neighbor to the property, and we keep being talked about as the only people who aren't in opposition to it. That's because we've never personally had any sort of issues that have arose from what has gone on up there to date. We've never experienced noise problems. We haven't had problems with people driving crazy or disrupting our property in any way, which are things that other people have had problems with. So we personally haven't had any issues that would cause us to say no. If anything, we paid a lot for our house, so when we do decide to sell it, we want it to be worth at least what we paid for it, hopefully more. The property that she bought when we moved in there was vacant. It was sort of an eyesore, hadn't been updated or upkept in any way. She, if anything, I feel has raised my property value by updating and making it look better. So I wanted to say that we aren't in opposition to be the one neighbor who doesn't want to fit in with everybody else or have a bone to pick with someone, only because we haven't experienced any problems with the property to date in the way that she has used it. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Donelon. Another person, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Regina Ortega. 1402 East Mesquite is my home. I am here to share the love letters with you for Darlene. These have been referenced already here in this meeting. A lot of folks being able to take advantage of her property at DJ's Casa. I was asked to actually read one of the letters, make it public, because we really feel that it speaks to Darlene's contribution to the community, her generosity, and to her character. The letter was written by Father Arnold from Holy Angels Catholic Church. He was here for about 9 years, and then he's since moved to Tucson, but he felt compelled to write this letter, and we want to share it with you today. The letter states, "Hello, Darlene. I hope and pray this message finds you well. I'm writing to you because I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude for allowing me to stay at DJ's Casa for the 3 days during my spiritual retreat. It was a great way to recharge myself from my hectic and emotionally demanding work. The place was perfect for me. Thank you so much. You've been a blessing to the Holy Angels Parish. When I was pastor there for almost 9 years, you have been so generous to the parish. And when you're done with DJ's Casa, which I believe you placed a place you dedicated to your husband, the first activity being done in that newly renovated house was the Christmas holiday event. We had it on November 3rd, 2018, from 8 to 4. It was a very organized fundraising activity headed by the parish. It was a great success, and because you wanted to help the parish to pay for the rectory renovation, you decided to donate our rent for the DJ's place. Being the pastor then, I was so happy and grateful for you and everyone who worked so hard for the event. When our sodality group asked that they would celebrate their Christmas party that year at DJ's place, again, you happily donated the rent of the place, and you were so happy prepping the food for us. I know very well that you have spent a fortune to renovate the place and hopefully make a return of investment, but you made an option to share and waive our responsibility to rent. From the bottom of my heart, I would like to once and for all convey with my heartfelt thanks for your kind and generous heart. What a blessing you are to me personally and to the community as well. I hope and pray that whatever project and business you have, it will keep growing and continue to help people in the community. Gratefully yours, Father Arnold." Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ortega. Does anyone else have?
If no one else intends to speak, I'd like to make a few comments in closing. This is
We
Larry.
definitely do have someone speaking. We have a few more people speaking.
Okay, I'll wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Ruben Mariscal. I'm here to speak on behalf of Darlene Jonovich. I have known Darlene for 4 years. She has hosted functions at the 1855 South Holder Drive. for many residents of the Globe Miami, including myself. Recently, my mother passed away after a long battle with an illness. Darlene opened up the casa to host a reception for my family during this difficult time. She followed all guidelines for the COVID-19 pandemic with temperature checks, mandatory face masks, hand sanitizing stations, and social distancing. Out of the kindness of her heart, she provided and made all the food that served us all. It was a nice and proper reception for my family at this time. The casa is not a party house. It's a place for opportunity for people to enjoy memorable events such as a family reunions, work team buildings, showers, small wedding receptions, and birthdays without the huge cost that usually comes with such events. That was Darlene's vision when she came up with this brilliant idea to open her home for people to enjoy these wonderful memories at her casa. Can you imagine what this can mean for the local hotel, family-owned restaurants, and shops? This is a perfect opportunity to bring revenue to the community, and it's a benefit to all. We need this in the Globe Miami area. Thank you for your time and allowing me to speak on behalf of Darlene Jonovich. I also have a second letter that was from another family member. It says, to whom it may concern, Darlene Jonovich established DJ's Casa is a great and positive establishment in the Globe Miami area. It serves as a place for gatherings, small weddings, reunions, career businesses, workshops, and is an alternative for those who cannot afford overpriced venues. People with small budget benefits from this less costly service provided. Darlene opened up her place with a big heart and passion for people, respectfully making sure families and friends have a memorable experience. A while back, Ms. Jonovich hosted a luncheon for our family upon our mother's passing. She followed the strict guidelines of social distancing and sanitization. We had an outpouring of compliments from friends and families. They enjoyed the atmosphere, hospitality, and the settings of the DJ Casa as well. The procedures followed at that time. This location is hidden treasure in the Gila County and needs to prosper and grow. For the people to come together safely with a homely atmosphere. Darlene is a responsible business owner and holds her partners, patrons, and employees to high standards of conduct. Once you visit the establishment, you would be total amazed. It is a place where you want to respect its boundaries, knowing others can benefit from this venue. Thank you at this time from the Mariscal and the Flores family.
Thank you, Mr. Mariscal. Anyone else have?
Hi, my name is Leilani Gibson, and I'm at 1865 Holder Drive. We are right next to the property. I just keep asking myself, why are we even here? What are we doing? This was done illegally. This is spot zoning. This was done behind our back. Nobody ever came out and posted signs and said, we're changing zoning, you're gonna have commercial next to you. All we knew is that Darlene had bought the place and we were just trying to be good neighbors, putting up with some things that were hard to put up with. That's what you do when you're neighbors, and that's what we were trying to do, was just, put up some things that happen. And then we started hearing more and more about how this was commercial and it was an event place, and there started to be more and more and more things going on. And then, yeah, it's just really, really difficult. Me and my husband put everything into our home. This is where we chose to live. I worked for Century 21 here in Globe for 6 years, and we looked and looked and looked for a property that we fell in love with, that we wanted to build our dream home. Just so happens Kendrick Holder had a piece of property. We met with him. He had very strict guidelines. It had to be this big a house. It couldn't be smaller than this. He was very strict on a lot of different things. We were buying the property from him, and that was exciting to us because we knew at that time if he held us to that high a level, he was going to hold other people to that high a level. Every home out there is absolutely gorgeous. That's why we put everything we have to be out there, to have our home, to raise our kids there, our dream home, so that we could retire out there. It's a beautiful area. It's a beautiful place. We have nothing against Darlene. You know, her idea is a good idea, just not in the middle of a residential place. Kendrick Holder owned that house, and then he and Donnie DeVore. Anyway, Donnie owned it secondly, and I knew both of them very well. I was very close to both of them, and neither one of them would be happy with this being turned into a commercial. That is not what they wanted. They meant it to be a residential area. That's how they had it always, and that's the way it should remain. There are other places that Darlene could move to and make a commercial place where everyone can go there and enjoy. This is not it. This is residential. This was done illegally. Nobody ever told us. And you know, we had a comment come back on us saying, why didn't you guys say something sooner? Why didn't you guys say something sooner? We were trying to be good neighbors, putting up with some things that were really hard for us and really irritating. And we didn't know that we were the neighborhood police. We thought that the city was taking care of us, that the city was making sure that things like this didn't happen. This was not the kind of thing that should happen. I cannot believe that any one of you would want this to go next to the house that you put everything in. This is heartbreaking for us. I'm sure she has good intentions, just not in the middle of a residence. It's illegal, it's spot zoning, and it's not right, and I am begging you to please not let this go on and on and on. It's been long enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, I know I've already spoken once, but it's important I'd like to say one brief thing you guys might.
Okay.
Travis Holder again, 1875 South Holder Drive. One thing I just wanted to let the council, not the council, I'm sorry, Planning and Zoning Commission, not at the council meeting, know, is just a real quick brief background. You know, Leilani said, we didn't know. We didn't know. We had no idea. We saw this stuff happening. We're like, what's going on? So it was actually brought to the mayor's attention. That's how we've actually come to here. And I mean, I see a whole pile of letters that have come in support of this property. Not one of them lives out there. I'll tell you right now, not one of them lives out there. And if they did, I highly doubt they would write that. I'm sure they're happy because, yeah, there was free swimming lessons. That's awesome. There's a big problem with that, though. That actually shows after they were given a notice of violation, they had swimming lessons. They had events. Notice of violation means you shut down. We brought this up with the city. They already know this. But just so you guys know, notice of violation means you should cease and desist. But instead of cease and desisting, there were swimming lessons every day in the summer. That's when my daughter almost got hit head on. There were several things that went on events. I know they were told to taper down, but that is not cease and desist. And so to me, you guys kind of need to know that. That's why we have a problem trusting the city 100% with any kind of conditions, because so far no conditions have been met. They've continued to run this business. It has tapered down lately, but I mean, swimming lessons several days of the week, all summer long. That is not a cease and desist. And that still goes back to the problem. It's a safety hazard on a private drive. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Deanna, I'm sorry, did you want to say something? Okay, I just wanted to see if Deanna Jonovich, Larry Schubert on Zoom had anything to say.
Yes, I'm prepared to make some final comments if everyone else has spoken.
Well, we have one more person to speak if you want to be the final comment.
Okay, I'll wait.
All
Thank
right.
you.
This will be brief. I actually have a letter from Donnie DeVore. This is back when they were trying to change the zoning back then for something else. And in looking through our paperwork, we came across this letter. This is a letter from Donnie. This is her own signature and everything. She would not have wanted this, and this is how I know. She says, I'm writing this letter in hopes that my voice will be heard. I have not been able to attend any of the meetings because of illness and because I was never notified of any meetings. I also didn't realize that I needed to be there, since my understanding of the development was that it was going to have on-site homes built next to me. I am very opposed to having RV park model trailers move in. They will lessen the value of my home, which I have lived in for 27 years. I also do not want the traffic that 133 RVs are going to bring. Please consider this when voting on the development and the zoning for it. I would just like to say, Donnie had been there for 27 years. Me and my husband have been there for a little over 27 years, and we just don't want it.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. All right, we are ready for the final comments. Is that Larry?
Thank you. My name is Larry Schubert. I'm an attorney in Tucson. I've heard so much tonight about this commercial use and it being inappropriate in the area. But I would first like to point out that even in the R1 zone, a church is a conditionally permitted use. And certainly no one could argue that an appropriate function at a church is to have gatherings, to even have weddings. That's all Darlene Jonovich has intended to do. What she did is what the most conscientious of people should do. She went to the city of Globe and she said, I would like to use this property as an event center. She was told it is appropriately zoned for that permitted use. No one in the city of Globe will deny having made that comment. So the argument that you've heard earlier today that anyone that does a commercial undertaking could then come in for rezoning is inapplicable to the facts that really occurred in this situation. Darlene Jonovich was told her property was an appropriate zone for an event center. She submitted building plans. Those building plans required her to improve that property to commercial grade standards. Over 2 years, she engaged in submitting plans, having city inspections, obtaining approvals, all to meet the commercial standards. She has invested more than $300,000 in this piece of property to meet commercial code criteria for an event center. She has a property that's now American Disabilities Act compliant. She has an employee washroom. She has a commercial grade kitchen. It's a swimming pool that's been brought up to commercial standards, all done under the auspices of the City of Globe. So what this request for rezoning is to bring about an element of fairness in the situation, because it was the city that allowed this to proceed in that fashion. They issued permits, they allowed the commercial improvements to be constructed, and now we have to deal with that situation. The request for rezoning is for transitional, which, as Mr. Burkhardt has pointed out, is meant to be a separation between commercially zoned property and residentially zoned property. So it's certainly in the appropriate location for that. The pad overlay is to allow the existing improvements to be utilized in the fashion that would then be allowed under the transitional zoning. So the idea that we have to further submit a site plan, again, is a misleading argument. We're not trying to further develop the property. It had already been developed and approved. As far as this being an inappropriate use within the neighborhood, the commission should certainly be aware of the fact that after the City of Globe issued to DJ Casa a business license allowing this use to be perpetuated, Darlene Janovich conducted these activities for 5 months without any objection by any neighbor. That's how innocuous her use actually is. It's not what we would characterize as a commercial use, such as a restaurant or some other intensive activity. It's a place of just public accommodation where she has gatherings, wedding events, the same type of things that would be permitted in the R19 zone as an ancillary activity to a church or even to a bed and breakfast. You could certainly have a party at a bed and breakfast. You can have a party in your backyard. So it's not that kind of commercial use that would be inconsistent or incongruous with this neighborhood. It's an appropriate use. What is being proposed in the staff report is that there be certain conditions that would be placed as condition precedents to her allowing to go forward. If in fact she can't meet those conditions, then the use can't go forward. So the idea that we can't widen the road or improve the road or have appropriate access, they're all misleading arguments. They're inappropriate to what it is you're being requested to do, and that is to make a recommendation to the mayor and council about the application for TR, for a PAD ordinance overlay to a TR rezoning request that meets the criteria imposed by the city staff. So that's all we're requesting. And at this time, all we're asking is that you make an appropriate recommendation to the mayor and council. I would be happy to answer any further questions, but I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Schubert. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Schubert? Any questions for him?
I do. I have a question. So when was this property purchased?
I'm afraid I do not have the date when it was purchased. I'm sorry.
Is there just a general year?
Well, certainly I know from my review of the file that it was over 2 years that she was engaged in undertaking the improvements of the property, submitting plans, because I have all those permits. I have all the permit approvals from the city of Globe. So I know that that was over 2 years. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of backing into the answer to your question. It has to be more than 2 years ago that she purchased the property.
I'm taking a look here at the county website. It appears that it was purchased in 2016. Is that about right?
2016? That I don't have any information that would say that that's inaccurate. I would agree with that.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Comment.
Yes.
This probably seems rather simple, but I have to put myself in the shoes of these people that live in the neighborhood and have their homes there. I know how I would feel if somebody put something like this in my neighborhood. I wouldn't be happy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am. Mhm. Thank you, Ms. Domelin. Yes.
She's absolutely correct. That was my brother's house at the time when the house was going on. And I was in opposition to the gas station because I knew that that would hurt my brother's property value. And so they knew about everything that was going on. They knew that was also commercial property in front of them. They didn't know that it could be commercial property beside them. We're talking about something different here. Whenever we all moved here, my grandpa owned all this property. It's always been residential. It's never been commercial. It's on, we know on the Hollis side it is, but on our side it's not. It never has been. Everything that Darlene has done outside of the city, such as a loan, such as property taxes, all state R1-9. I looked it up. I can assure you that. I promise you that. It's no surprise.
Thank you, Mr. Holder.
Vice Chair, if there's no further
If there, no more comments,
close the public hearing.
we can close the public hearing.
And further discussion, or call for the motion?
Y'all need any
You're
further
comfortable?
discussion, or are you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
In terms of with what happened with the city, so this took place over several years, is that right?
What it appears.
I mean, in terms of the property was purchased, and then all of these other investments. Look, it appears that the buy price on it was about $210,000 from what I could see there on the county. And then I know that it was mentioned there, I think it was Mr. Schubert mentioned she had invested $300,000. Was that on top of the buy price, or is, I'm just assuming that it's the buy price as well as maybe about $100,000 in improvements. Is that about right? Is that?
No, it's 300 over the price.
Okay. Gotcha there. And so this took place over the course of 2 years where the city was giving thumbs up and giving approval, is that correct?
Correct.
Right there. And then, Another question I have is, so when you purchased the property, I know that, at least for me, you know, I have recently gotten into real estate, but I've been dealing with real estate for a good number of years. It's attention to detail. I know that whenever you're placing a bet on a business, you have to look at all those types of considerations that was mentioned, you know, by these folks earlier. You know, you're looking at the zoning requirements, you're looking at, you know, taxes, you're looking at, it's basically when you're making a business decision, you know, in America, there's no one there to kind of, you know, save you in that regard when you make a business decision. So I guess who mentioned it? So I know that you said that someone told you, but during the time when you're sitting down and filling out that thick packet, you know, with, say, a title agency, you didn't notice that it was just a residential zoning?
No, who told me was Chris Coffey, and he said that it was commercial.
Gotcha. And when was this around? Gotcha. And around when was this again? That
Before I started doing all this.
gotcha. So this was after you'd purchased the property, is that correct?
Correct.
And just to verify, somebody made a comment that, that you were paying residential taxes, not commercial taxes. I just want to know if that is correct or incorrect, or, I mean, it's hard to tell from this position.
You know, it is, I don't know what I'm really paying. I got it from my sister, and Pioneer Title, the insurance and the taxes go to Pioneer Title, and that is the payment each month that I use. They deal with it, they do.
Okay, so you were unaware which kind of taxes you're paying, is that correct? Okay, and you had a comment?
Yeah, it was my comment because the day
Oh,
I
okay.
found out that Chris Coffey told her that it's commercial, I went to the county, and the county, I asked them to get the public record, what that property address, what the taxes were. And it took me about 10 minutes to say it's residential. At first, they said, well, these commercial because they got permits. I said, no, what taxes are they paying? They verify that they're paying residential taxes, they always have, I knew my grandma was. She should have known because her great aunt was.
I'm sorry, it may just be me, but anybody that's speaking, we're not picking that up on this Zoom.
Okay, I'm sorry, we'll get them to the microphone. I'm sorry, you guys, if we have people on Zoom, we gotta speak either louder or go to a microphone. That would be, they need to hear. So the original question was, are they paying commercial or residential? And Ms. Jonovich said she pays a lump sum and the company takes care of it. And now Mr. Holder has a comment.
Yeah, Travis Holder, 1875 South Holder Drive. And the reason why I wanted to comment on this is because, like I said, the day I found out, I went to the county courthouse. They told me, oh, we don't know, we think it's commercial, she's done commercial permitting. I said, no, what is she paying? It's public record. They went and checked this. Oh, you're right, it's residential. It's always been residential. So when I got home that evening, I got on the planning and zoning map from the city, and sure enough, guess what? It's residential. And so we're like, how can this be? And that's whenever we got the mayor involved and all this other stuff. You know, there was stuff going on over there, but we had no clue it was commercial. And actually, I believe our neighbors told Chris Colopy whenever he said something about him being commercial, this is not commercial, it's never been commercial. And I believe one of our neighbors also told Darlene that it's residential. And I'm sorry to say this, but that's honestly took me 15 minutes to find out it was residential.
Thank you, Mr. Holder.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any more comments? Yes, sir.
I know we go through the same Pioneer Title Agency, you know, and pay the same payment, and we don't see.
Can you please state your name? I'm sorry.
Oh, Mac McLean. And we do the same thing, and I don't ever see any of that stuff either. But I do have to state that Chris Colopy has been with the city as the inspector for how many years? So he's been around a while, at least 5 years or so. So he should be fairly competent. So as in her defense, I mean, if she's asking a competent person, you know, hey, is this owned? And he's saying yes, issuing permits to her, I mean, she kind of took it and ran with it, yeah, but, I mean, like
Yeah.
I said, if someone wants to find out, yes, it's easy to find out information, so. But in order to find that out, you have to want to know, and she took it that Chris knew, and why wouldn't you run with it? I mean, I would.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Any more?
Vice Chair, Commissioners, I'm just looking on the county website. Sorry, I couldn't get in earlier
Yes.
for some reason, but it's been assessed as residential from what it looks like.
So it has been assessed as residential? That is the current assessment. Okay, well,
One thing I just have to say for the record, Ms. Janovich, I think that the place has a lot of heart. I think it's a very valuable place to the community. It's just really tough to see, you know, such a large investment there, and then you are told by someone who has the authority and, you know, the supposedly, you know, should have the expertise. You know, I can't comment as to what happened, but I know that whenever mistakes are made, you know, you also act on that information that's told to you. So I also have to say, you know, that's it's a very difficult position that you're in as well, you know, but I think what you are doing there, you know, I took a look at the website that you have there, and I see, you know, these letters. It's definitely, your heart is in it. You're definitely doing really wonderful things for the community. So I wanted to also, you know, mention that as well, because I think it's really neat what you have done to the place. When I look at it in terms of appeal, you know, in terms of, you know, if I were a neighbor and I saw the place looking nicer and nicer, I'm like, hey, that's good for us. So I also see that end of it as well. So, but anyhow, I just wanted to just make the comment as well.
I also want to echo his comment, Ms. Janovich. I read all of the letters of people that applauded you for being so giving, and Globe needs a lot of giving people like you. Everyone that commented for you said how kind and giving you were, and I wrote that down, like everyone said giving. And I think that that's just amazing. It talks a lot about your character, your person, so. Us. So if there are no more comments, we're going to go ahead and, let's see, I think it's called, we're going to motion.
You know, I actually have another question. This is probably more for you there, Dana. From your experience, so my big concern is this sets some type of, you know, precedent. It sends out a, you know, a message to the community. So what does that mean? You know, I mean, from your experience, anything you might have heard or read or studied from colleagues, what does this mean in terms of the city's credibility and to keep folks from saying, oh, well, I'm just going to go ahead and just, you know, kind of push forward here and just get things moving in this one direction. And I know that eventually, you know, there's going to be an exception made. I guess, have you seen that or heard of any situations where that's happened to municipality?
Well, I'll start by saying a lot of codes get changed at times, or properties rezoned, and this is a very unique circumstance that I've seen mistakes and had to go backwards and things like that, but not, you know, definitely this is a unique and complex circumstance, how it evolved. So it's unique. And so there's probably not another really good example, you know, nearby. But the city has codes. We are responsible for enforcing those codes. And the city also has remedies to make changes to codes, like a text amendment or a rezone in this, well, rezoning, change the map, basically. The zoning map is part of the zoning code. So when it happens, you just need to apply what your council has adopted as their ordinances and laws and procedures for processing these types of things to make that correction. You have in your report a list of the remedies that were presented to her that are those exact codes and ordinances that any property owner, all of us can, or you, can exercise if you wish to, because you own property here and you want to do something different with it. So she's gone down that list. She filed a administrative appeal to appeal my interpretation of the code. That is on a stay right now while she's going through this rezoning process. So that is that is the other avenue, one other avenue that she's exercised and is in process to, remedy it. Ultimately, the Board of Adjustment is the one who listens to all of these arguments and makes a final determination.
Gotcha.
So there's procedures in place to make these corrections, but as far as ignoring your code and or just taking actions above and beyond what it allows administratively, no, I subscribe to a code of ethics with my credential, and part of that is to make sure we're enforcing all the ordinances that we're required to.
Gotcha there. Thank you. And another question here too. So if this, motion were to pass, say, this gets
Recommended.
Yeah, it gets recommended to the City of Globe
Council
and the council. What I know that they were mentioning, that this still would have to be approved by JT Morning Glory Enterprises, the owner of that easement area. I guess what recourse do they have? Let's say if they say, you know what? No. So I guess what would that look like? Would that be some kind of a legal?
So, Vice Chair, Commissioners, this is newer information to hear that objection and to get in contact with them. And so we're going to learn more in the coming days. Ultimately, though, that's an obstacle that we'll work through in one way or another. And that's part of the process. Unfortunately, I know this has been late to come up, but that is part of the process. I can say, private access or things that are dependent on other people. We hope that they go and overcome those obstacles before you or the council would have to hear or discuss that. That's really the goal, I think, from my perspective.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and motion to take this to a vote. Is that what we
So
do?
you're going to make you so call a motion. So we need
Call
a
a
motion
motion.
on the floor. Whether again you can deny, recommend denial, recommend approval with conditions, or recommend approval to City Council.
Okay.
So you just need a motion on one of those three things.
Okay, so we're going to motion to recommend, can I just say them all and then? Or
No,
just-
just make one. Is there a motion on the floor? Does anybody would like to make a motion? And then once a motion is made, there will be a second, and then you can
Okay.
discuss the motion.
Okay,
Only.
okay.
So if somebody wants to go ahead and make a motion.
Anyone like to make a motion?
I apologize. I actually have another question here.
Oh. No, I'm glad.
My concern is, so we're wanting to make a decision about something that, to me, it is a can of worms legally. My concern is what happens if if the neighbors want to. I know that there are attorneys involved here. I feel like there needs to be more legal consideration, regarding this. I don't like the idea of putting this city in a situation where you're going to be fighting some type of battle down the road, with all the different departments and assessors and recorders and zoning and city. I at least for me right now, and at least just for the record, I have a hard time kind of say, hey, approval, denial, or however at this time. I would.
So that's a good point, but what we're voting for is a recommendation. So we don't, even if we recommend yes or no, it still goes to the next level. And they actually make the decision. Is that correct?
Correct, and if I could, we like planning and zoning, and yes, this is all land use related, but stay focused on the land use aspects of this. Yes, your concern for the roadway obviously is a valid one, but council will be much more involved in the legal aspects of.
But I feel you're right. This is a can of worms. We only know a little portion of it. So based on the information we've received, I think what we need to motion and vote for is whether we recommend them to change the zoning or change it with conditions or deny it. And I think that that's what we're recommending tonight.
Correct.
That is correct.
I'd like to make a motion.
Anyone want to make a motion? No pressure. Anyone?
I'll make a motion to deny it.
I second that motion.
So there's a motion to deny with a second.
Second.
And if there's further discussion on that motion, you have that discussion now? And if there's no further discussion, then you call the question and we vote. You vote.
Okay. Any further discussion? No? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a vote.
Aye.
So does that mean you deny it?
I
Correct.
vote
Okay.
to deny it.
Favor of denial.
You vote deny? Sorry. You vote deny? And I vote to deny too. So we'll go ahead and close.
Motion was denied unanimously. The record will reflect that. Now we move on to agenda item 2, adjournment. Any motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second that motion? Okay. We've seconded the motion and
All
we,
in favor?
all in favor?
Aye.
And I, and unanimous to adjourn.
Thank you very much. Great discussion.
7:50.
Fortunate in many aspects, so thank you.